begin with the latest developments in the Gilgo Beach murder case.
3 women along Gilgo Beach on Long Island.
There's a new development in the case of Rex Heuermann, the man charged in connection with several murders near Gilgo Beach on Long Island.
Rex Heuermann, I'm an architect, I'm an architectural consultant, I'm a troubleshooter, born and raised on Long Island.
Okay.
Been working in Manhattan since 1987.
Some cases leave a scar on history, a story so dark that it grips you from the very first moment, where innocent lives are stolen and a predator lurks in the shadows, unseen for years. The case we're about to unravel is one of those. How brutally were these victims murdered? How long did they suffer? And worst of all, how did a serial killer manage to stay hidden for so long? Then there's the wind, howling through the dunes, carrying the salty scent of the Atlantic, whispering over the untouched sand where something terrible lies hidden. The waves crash against the shore, a steady, rhythmic pulse, eerily indifferent to the horrors buried beneath the sand. It's December 2010, and the cold grips Long Island like an unforgiving vice. A police search is underway along the isolated stretch of Gilgo Beach, a place known for its desolation, where the road snakes between thick brush and the endless sea. Officers aren't searching for bodies, not yet. They're looking for a missing woman, Shannon Gilbert, an escort who vanished after making a chilling 911 call months earlier.
State Police, Trooper Fry. State Police.
Yeah, there's somebody after me.
I'm sorry?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Okay, where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you, ma'am?
I don't know.
You're driving right now?
No, I'm inside the house.
I'm sorry?
I'm inside the house.
What house?
I don't know. Can you trace where I am?
I'm sorry?
Can you trace where I am?
No, I can't. What's your callback number you're calling from?
Huh?
What phone number are you calling from?
Somebody's after me. Please.
But what they find changes everything. A cadaver dog stiffens, catching an unmistakable scent. The handler moves forward, heart pounding, pushing through the brittle reeds. And then, a body. Wrapped in burlap, partially hidden by the tall grass. A grim silence falls over the scene. But this isn't Shanann. The discovery sends a shockwave through law enforcement. As they widen the search, dread seeps into their bones. More bodies begin to surface. Not one, not two, 4 women, carefully placed along the same stretch of road, each one wrapped in similar burlap, positioned like a macabre pattern left behind by a ghostly predator. The realization is chilling. This isn't a single murder. This is a dumping ground. The press calls them the Gilgo Four: Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Amber Costello, and Megan Waterman, all young women, all escorts who had advertised their services online, and all murdered by the same unknown hand. As the news spreads, so does the fear. If 4 bodies were left here, how many more are there? In the following months, that question is answered in the most horrifying way possible. By the time the search is complete, the body count has risen to 11. Scattered along Ocean Parkway, some victims had been dismembered, their remains found in separate locations, suggesting an even more complex, calculated killer. A baby, an unidentified man, a woman whose torso was found years earlier in another part of New York. The connections are disturbing, tangled in a mystery stretching back decades. And yet one piece remains missing. Shanann Gilbert, the woman who unintentionally led authorities to this nightmare, is still nowhere to be found. But her story is far from over. The bodies uncovered along Gilgo Beach told a story of pain, control, and precision. This was not the work of a reckless killer acting on impulse. It was methodical, calculated, and disturbingly deliberate. Each victim bore the marks of someone who had perfected their technique, ensuring that they suffered before their bodies were discarded like objects. The Gilgo Four, Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Amber Costello, and Megan Waterman, shared hauntingly similar fates. Forensic analysis revealed that they had been strangled. The killer had used their bare hands or a ligature, a chilling sign of dominance and personal involvement. Strangulation is not instantaneous. It takes minutes, between 3 to 5 minutes of oxygen deprivation before the body shuts down, before the victim stops struggling. That means each of these women felt their final moments in slow, agonizing horror, the pressure tightening around their throats, their bodies fighting desperately to stay alive. Bruises along their necks showed signs of sustained force, meaning the killer didn't simply choke them and walk away. He held on, ensuring there was no chance of survival. Some of the bodies exhibited fractured hyoid bones, an indicator of extreme pressure applied to the throat. This wasn't just murder, it was a statement. Each woman was carefully wrapped in burlap, a choice that suggested control. The killer didn't dump their bodies in a hurry. He took time to prepare them, to conceal them in a way that fit his twisted ritual. Burlap is coarse, it holds fibers, and it's difficult to dispose of completely, yet he used it anyway. That meant he wasn't afraid of the evidence, he was confident, methodical, and he had done this before. But then there were the other victims, the ones who didn't fit the same pattern. Jessica Taylor's remains were found along Ocean Parkway, but forensic analysis revealed something far more disturbing. Her torso had been discovered years earlier in 2003 in Manorville, New York. The killer had dismembered her, separating her remains across multiple locations. The same fate befell Valerie Mack. Her partial remains had been found in 2000, also in Manorville, before more of her body was located at Gilgo Beach in 2011. This suggested something chilling. This killer changed his method over time. At some point, he experimented with dismemberment, severing torsos from limbs, scattering remains as if he were perfecting a craft. But then he shifted back, wrapping victims whole, untouched, in burlap. Why? Was it a different killer using the same dumping ground? Or did he evolve, learning that leaving bodies intact created a stronger message? And then there was Baby Doe, the youngest, most haunting victim. Forensics determined she was only 24 months old. She was found near the remains of a woman known as Peaches, a victim identified only by a tattoo on her body. DNA confirmed Peaches was Baby Doe's mother. But the most horrifying question remained. Was the child killed alongside her mother, or was she murdered separately? The forensic evidence didn't reveal a cause of death, but the placement of their bodies suggested that whoever killed Peaches had no hesitation in taking the life of an innocent child. The Long Island serial killer didn't just kill. He controlled, he manipulated, he took his time, ensuring that his victims felt every second of their fate. And then he vanished. Bodies were found, the crime scenes were established, but there was no suspect, no face to match the horror that had been uncovered along Gilgo Beach. The case was massive, yet the leads were few. Whoever had done this had been careful, calculated, and worst of all, he had gone undetected for years. Forensic experts scoured the remains for any DNA, any trace of hair, fiber, or skin cells that might have been left behind. But the killer had been meticulous. The burlap sacks used to wrap the victims didn't reveal any clear forensic evidence. He had handled them carefully, leaving no fingerprints, no blood, nothing that could directly identify him. However, there was something: phone records. Investigators discovered that Melissa Barthelemy, one of the Gilgo Four, had received mysterious calls before her disappearance. After she vanished, her family received disturbing phone calls from an unidentified man. He used Melissa's phone to call her younger sister, taunting her, speaking in a cold, calculating voice. He mocked her, claimed he had killed Melissa, and then quickly ended the call. The phone pinged off a tower in Midtown Manhattan, but it was a dead end. A disposable burner phone, untraceable. That's when investigators realized the killer had used multiple burner phones to contact his victims, arranging meetings with them before their murders. He had studied his craft, avoiding digital footprints. But even the most careful killers make mistakes. Detectives traced the victims' last known locations and noticed a pattern. The killer was selecting victims through online escort ads, specifically on Craigslist. This gave investigators a crucial insight. He was someone who understood technology, who knew how to hide, but also had a distinct hunting ground. Years passed, the case grew cold, leads dried up. The Long Island serial killer became a ghost, a name whispered in fear, but without a face. Then, in 2022, a breakthrough. Advancements in forensic genealogy, the same method used to catch the Golden State Killer, gave investigators a new tool. They revisited old DNA evidence using advanced testing to search for familial matches. And then, in 2023, after over a decade of searching, they had a name. Rex Heuermann, a New York City architect, a man who had blended into society so seamlessly that no one suspected he had been hiding a secret. But was he truly the Long Island serial killer, or was there more to the story? Heuermann wasn't the kind of man anyone expected. He wasn't a drifter, an outcast, or someone who had been on the police radar. He was a successful architect, a man with a stable job in New York City, living in Massapequa Park, a quiet suburban neighborhood just miles from where the bodies had been found. He was married, had children, and for all appearances lived an ordinary life. But beneath that normalcy, investigators believed, lurked a cold, methodical killer. Police narrowed their search, looking for familial connections in databases. Slowly, they worked their way to one man, Rex Heuermann.
I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island. Okay.
But they needed more. They began surveilling Heuermann, tracking his movements, watching his habits. His internet history became a key piece of evidence. His search history revealed an obsession with the Gilgo Beach murders. He had researched details of the case extensively, reading about his own crimes as if he were keeping score. Then came the phone records. Investigators linked burner phones used to contact some of the victims directly to locations near Heuermann's home and office. The technology that had once shielded him now became his downfall. But perhaps the most chilling evidence? His wife's DNA. The DNA connection. Hair found on one of the victims' bodies was tested against Heuermann's wife. The results showed that the strand belonged to someone from her direct lineage, meaning it had likely come from their home. Investigators theorized that the hair was transferred onto the victim from Heuermann himself, a critical piece of forensic evidence that tied him to the crime scenes. On July 13, 2023, after years of silence, the FBI and Suffolk County Police moved in. Rex Heuermann was arrested outside his Manhattan office. The news spread like wildfire. After more than a decade, the man believed to be the Long Island serial killer was finally in custody. The charges and theories. Heuermann was officially charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He was also named the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, though charges for her case were still pending. But as the case gained attention, questions remained. Was he the only killer? Some experts believe that while Heuermann may have been responsible for some of the murders, others could have been the work of a second, unidentified predator. The differences in how the bodies were disposed of, the gaps between killings, and the presence of unidentified victims hinted at multiple killers using Gilgo Beach as a dumping ground. Even with Heuermann behind bars, the mystery wasn't over. The families of the victims wanted answers. The public wanted to know, had they really caught the Long Island serial killer, or was another monster still out there? Rex Heuermann's arrest in 2023 brought a long-awaited sense of closure to some, but for many, the case of the Long Island serial killer remains far from over. Even with charges filed, there are still unanswered questions, missing pieces, and victims whose cases remain unresolved. The legal battle begins. Following his arrest, Heuermann pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. His defense team argued that there was no direct forensic evidence placing him at the crime scenes at the time of the murders. While prosecutors had linked him to the Gilgo Four, there were still several victims found along Ocean Parkway who had yet to be connected to him with certainty. The court case is ongoing, and Heuermann faces the possibility of life in prison if convicted. But what about the other bodies? Theories of a second killer. As investigators continued their work, some experts questioned whether Heuermann was responsible for all the murders. The dismembered remains of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack suggested a different level of brutality compared to the Gilgo Four, leading some to believe that another predator may have been active in the same area. Could multiple killers have used Gilgo Beach as a dumping ground over the years? The forensic evidence remains inconclusive, and law enforcement has yet to officially close that door. The mystery of Shanann Gilbert. Shanann Gilbert's case remains one of the most debated aspects of the investigation. Her remains were found in 2011, a year after the Gilgo Four were discovered, but police initially ruled her death as accidental, claiming she had drowned in the marsh. Her family rejected this theory, insisting she was another victim of the serial killer. The lack of clear forensic evidence leaves her case in a gray area, trapped between theory and uncertainty. The victims' families fight for justice. For the families of the victims, Heuermann's arrest was a step toward closure, but not the final chapter. Many still seek answers about their loved ones, demanding full transparency from law enforcement and a deeper investigation into the unidentified remains. Some believe that if authorities had acted sooner, especially after the taunting phone calls to Melissa Barthelemy's family, more lives could have been saved. The legacy of the Long Island serial killer. With the case still unfolding, the Long Island serial killer remains one of the most chilling crime stories in modern history. A case that took over a decade to crack, a killer who hid in plain sight, and a beach that held its secrets for years. But even with Heuermann behind bars, one question lingers. Is the true killer still out there? We've explored the entire case, from the first discoveries to the latest arrest. But now we turn to you. Do you believe Rex Heuermann was the only killer? Could there be more bodies yet to be found? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.